Hey everybody, welcome on here. I just wanted to get on here real quick and share what we've been sharing at our church lately and share another little update about what's been going on here. Of course, our very first update, of course, is that if you can see, no more casts on this arm. I was able to go in and have the x-rays done and have my arm checked out and found out that my elbow, the two fractures of my elbow healed. And now it's just a matter of doing some rehab on my elbow because I basically haven't been able to use my right arm for about a month and a half. And so now it's just kind of rehabbing and trying to get some strength back into my arm, into my right arm and everything, and just making sure the elbow stays okay. So do have a rehab schedule that I'll be following, but I wanted to say thank you to everybody who prayed and was sending me messages about my elbow. Thank you. It is better. It did heal, so we're glad about that. No surgery or anything else needed to be done. The other thing, we had our back to school outreach this last Sunday, and we had, I think, at least 30 kids that came, and we were able to have a good message. And we talked about Daniel, which I'll share the message here in a minute about Daniel, what we learned about Daniel. Then we were able to give out some nice bags that had some school supplies and maybe little toys and little treats and stuff to the kids. We were able to be such a blessing, and then we had, like I said, we had a pretty full house with kids and stuff in there this Sunday for our back to school outreach, and so that was great. So thank you to everybody who helped buy school supplies and send them down for us for that. That is what we were using those school supplies for, was that outreach. And so thank you to everyone who gave the school supplies or sent them down. We appreciate it, and it was such a blessing to the children of this community. The other thing I wanted to say is I did have a couple different people that reached out, and one was a church that said that they did an offering to try to kind of maybe help with that car fund that we were doing, and they had sent in us their offering to go towards that. And I just wanted to say, guys, I can't tell you how that leaves me almost speechless, and how much that helps our heart and blesses our heart to know that people are there and that they're willing to help us and to be a part of that. And so I'm really blessed by that, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who has given to that so far and been a help to us, and of course to our monthly supporters that make it possible for us to continue to do what we are doing here. And we're getting ready to a point here soon where we're going to have to be doing our residency, but we finally, after 10 years, will get to change our residency. We'll go to a permanent residency this year. Usually it's only supposed to take 5 years, but we lost like 4 years because of COVID and a new president taking over. We lost about 4 years of residency because of that. So we finally got to where we can apply for that. Something that does come with some additional costs and everything like that, but it'll be nice to finally have kind of that permanent residency this year that we can apply for. And that'll be coming up here sometime in March or April. We should be having to do that. So please pray that everything with that goes smoothly. We were able to get all the paperwork that we needed and filled out and everything this summer, and got that submitted to our lawyer. So I think that's it. Announcements wise, like I said, just gonna continue to be doing our school. School's going great. Our kids are doing well. Of course, I guess the next big thing we got coming up at the church will be, we do have services coming up, but the next big thing will be Easter. We'll do our big Easter egg hunt and everything like we do for Easter every year. And we'll do that as well. So I guess that's about it. Announcements wise, of updates of what's been going on here. So we're gonna get into our lesson, and what we talked about this week is I did the lesson of Daniel. And I realized that there were 5 different things that we could learn from the story of Daniel, which is found in Daniel chapter 6. And where we kind of started around verse 10 when we talked about that. And what we talk about, if you don't know the story, there was a man named Daniel who was a faithful servant of God. And then there was a king at that time who had come up and said that he had some advisors and friends who said, you know what, we should make a mandate or a decree that nobody can worship or honor anything else but you and a statue of you. And if they worship anything else and anybody else besides you, there should be a penalty. They should be thrown into a lion's den. So he has his advisors and friends as king, and he decides that he's going to let them talk him into it. So they make this decree that says you cannot pray or worship any other person besides the king at that time without being penalized, right? Well, what we also read about a little bit is that Daniel was a very honest and trustworthy man because he was a man of God. So the king liked Daniel and he had the king's favor. And so the king kind of was starting to want to put Daniel in charge of more things, which of course made the other advisors and friends a little bit jealous. So what they do, they said, we've got to find something that we can hang Daniel on. We got to find something that he's doing wrong or something to kind of prove that he's not the person he says he is, right? And so what do? Well, they go to where he is and where he lives, and they see that Daniel, even after the decree has been put out that you can worship nobody else and pray to nobody else, if you do, it can be penalized. And Daniel full well knows this, but what does Daniel do? Daniel continues to keep praying to God. Everything, he prays to him 3 times a day. Well, those guys who were looking for something to hang Daniel up on, they had just found it. They saw him praying to God. And so what do? They run straight to the king and says, hey, you made a decree, right? And we're starting in verse 10 through about verse 12. And it's them basically going back and say, didn't you make a decree that if anybody was found worshiping anybody else but you, they'd be thrown alive? And he said, yes, I did. I did make that decree, and I will honor it. And they said, well, we want to tell you that we saw Daniel worshiping God. And so the first lesson that we learn in those 4 verses is this, that if you follow God, if you are obedient to God and follow God, accusations and trials will come. Because when you are following God and you are acting in the way that God would want you to act, and we are following the path he has in our life, it's not going to make sense to everybody. And there are going to be people that actually don't like that, that we're honorable, that we're trustworthy, that we're doing what we say we're going to do, and that some people that either makes them feel bad or they think they look bad, and also just like those advisors of the king didn't like Daniel because the king loved Daniel because he was honest and trustworthy and was dependent. He could depend on him. And so what we see here is that they start making these accusations. They had to find something wrong with him. And I can tell you right now that if you're following God, that same thing may happen to you. That trials are going to come because we have an enemy that does not want God's mission accomplished, right? And he might use other people in our lives to put accusations against us or to say things or bring trials against us. And so we see that here that Daniel's faced with the exact thing. These guys are like, hey, you made this decree, this guy's breaking it, throw him in the lion's den. So here he was. Hopefully we've never had to be actually thrown into an actual lion's den. I don't think anybody I know has actually had to experience that. But this is what he was facing, and Daniel still prayed, and he still decided to do what he knew was right. And because he did what was right, it upset some people who didn't understand. Because people who don't understand the truth of God and don't really believe it, it smells like death to them, it says in the Bible. So they're always going to look for a way to trip up people that they see doing this. And so these guys had done it with Daniel. And so they say Daniel does it, so he needs to be thrown into the lion's den. And that leads us into our second lesson. So the first one we learn is that there will be accusations and trials. Well, here's the thing. Our second lesson we learn is to never give up on God. And how do we learn that? Verse 13 of Daniel 6, if you go read it, it says that the king, Daniel, is the one who exiles of Judah, who is paying no attention to you. And they say this, and Daniel's like, yeah, I prayed, right? And he still prayed 3 times a day, even knowing that he could face a lion's den and face punishment. He still continued to pray to God because he knew it was better to please God than to please man. He knew it was better to pray and please God than to honor that king and that man and displease God. So he did what he knew was right. He never gave up on God. And even when he got to the point where he got caught and was proud about it, he was like, yeah, I prayed. Like, he didn't deny it. He didn't do anything like that. He never gave up on God. And that is a lesson that we can learn, that as people who are going to follow Christ, there are going to be accusations and there are going to be trials, but we also have to be people who don't give up on God. That we continually trust him and know that as long as he is with us and we have him on our side, that no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And so we see that in Daniel. And then what I like is the next part going into starting about verse 17. They go into like he's been talked to the king. The king says he's guilty. So the king says, okay, we have to throw you in the lion's den. So they take him down and they put him in the lion's den. And then I like what it said about the next part. It says that, so he put him in the current, and I'm going to actually read it. It's verse 18 of Daniel 6. It says, then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. And there's even some talk that people believe that in that time that he might have even prayed, kind of maybe said a prayer to his God or to Daniel's God to protect Daniel, because he felt horrible about putting someone that he cared for in that lion's den. So what we learn from that part of the story, the third lesson that we learn is when we act in our faith, and we stand up for our faith, we never know who will be impacted. Because here's a king that had gotten so talked into how great he was by his friends and advisors that he made a decree to not worship anybody but him. Daniel worshiped somebody besides him. He had to throw him in the lion's den, but here he is losing sleep over it. He was impacted by the faith that Daniel had to continue to pray, and even when he was brought in front of the king, he didn't deny it. And his act of faith was impacting the king. His act of faith was going to impact those people who had accused him and found him. And so what we have to remember is that no matter what, when we are standing up and acting out our faith, we never know who's going to be impacted. And sometimes those accusations and trials that we have to face, when we come out of them on the other side because we trusted God and he gets us through them, you don't know how many people that see that could be impacted by that moment. So a lot of times the things that happen to us aren't solely for us, but they're also to impact people in our lives as well. And so we see that you never know who's going to be impacted. So the king's up all night and he's there. And like I said, there was talk that people believe that maybe he even prayed at some point in the night for Daniel. And what I love is this part, and this is the part that when I heard this story as a kid, nobody focused on. And I think it's a really key part of this story that I think we got to look at. And it's this, and it's found when we're looking around verse 19 and 20 of Daniel chapter 6, is it says, when the sun came up at the first light of dawn, the king got up and he went to the lion's den, and he says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, has he rescued you? Are you okay? So this man who was made a decree that nobody should worship anybody but him, found out that this guy was found guilty of not worshiping him, threw him in the lion's den, yet he had enough faith. He was so impacted by Daniel's faith that he went down to see if Daniel was okay. Like he goes out, I mean, if you throw somebody in the lion's den, you don't throw them down there thinking they're going to be okay. So it's interesting to me that this man went down there expecting Daniel to respond and not have been cat chew. You know what I'm saying? Like he expected him to respond. So he had been impacted, right? And of course it says then that Daniel answered, yes, my king, live forever. My God sent angels and closed the lion's mouth, and I am not hurt. And so what we see here, the fourth lesson we learn, is that your prayers for others will be heard. And your prayers for you will be heard, because Daniel prayed, God protect me, and he answered it. But your prayers for others will be heard, because I honestly believe when he wasn't sleeping and having a struggle with Daniel being in the lion's den, I believe the king prayed for Daniel. And God answered that prayer. And so what we learn is our prayers for others and our prayers are heard by God. They may not always be answered the way we expected, but they're always heard. God hears our prayers. And I just love that part of it. And I love the fact that the king goes down there like, hey, Daniel, are you okay? This guy spent the night in a den full of lions, and you're going down there expecting him to be okay? That was because he was impacted by Daniel's faith and because he prayed and he believed it could happen. And we see here that God hears our prayers. And then the last thing that we have here, lesson that we learn on this, is it says the king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift him out. And actually, it goes on to say later on, a little bit later on, that he threw the guys that accused Daniel into the lion's den after that. But what I love about this is the fifth lesson that we learn is that he pulls Daniel out of the lion's den. And this is what we learn from that. The impossible can only happen with God. With God, the impossible becomes impossible, right? And so if we're really facing an accusation or a trial that we feel like it's impossible to beat, you gotta, don't give up. Give it to God. Pray to him. He hears your prayers. And if you act in faith during that time of accusation, you don't know who's going to be impacted when God shows up and he does the impossible. Right? So that is what we have to realize is the five main things that we see here from Daniel is accusations and trials will come. But as believers who believe in Christ and believe in his love for us, we have to never give up, because we don't realize that what we're going through may not just be for us, but might be for other people. We don't know who will be impacted by what we're going through. We continue to pray to God, and like Daniel did, we don't stop praying, even if it means we're in a lion's den. And we have lion's dens today. Our lions look a little bit different. There may not be literal lions, but we have depression, anxiety, bullies. We have people on the internet, just spewing anger. And all. We have people that are just chomping at us and trying to eat away at us. Our past mistakes. We could live in a lion's den of all these things coming against us. But if we never give up and we continue to pray, knowing that God hears our prayers, and knowing that when God answers that prayer and he helps us through that tough time, we don't know who's going to be impacted. And why do we pray? Why do we continue to pray to God? Because we know that the impossible is possible for God and God alone. And so that is the five lessons that we learned from Daniel. And I hope that maybe if you heard this and you listened all the way to this point in the thing, I hope that that meant something to you. I know it's meant a lot to me. I have been going through a lot of things coming at every different angle. I have felt like I'm living in a lion's den some days, of just feeling overwhelmed, and I just have to continually just give it to Christ, give it to God, know that he hasn't given up on me, and things, even things that have hurt, I know that there's a purpose for those things, and I have to trust God. And I hope that if you're going through that same thing, maybe there's an accusation or a trial you're going through right now, I want you to be like Daniel. Don't give up. Continue to pray no matter what. And just know that God can do the impossible. And when he does, you never know who's going to be impacted. God bless you guys. Again, thank you everybody who helps support us and keeps us down here, encourages us, meets up with us when we're in the States in the summer. And just we thank you for all your love and support. And remember, if you ever need prayer or just need to talk to somebody about something that's going on in your life, I'm always just a message away. God bless you guys.